Okay, Psych 250, this is volume 2 from chapter 6. We were talking about somatic disorders. Have you ever worked with somebody who looked like they were always sick and they just couldn't do the job they were supposed to be doing? How convenient is that? That could be an issue of malingering, faking a disorder to achieve some identifiable goal. Sometimes you get people faking to claim insurance money or just to get out of work. This happens. And you have to kind of understand why. Why would we fake an illness? And you would think, I would never do that. But have you done it in the past? Do you remember when you were small and you said, Mom, I can't go to school today because my head hurts, my stomach hurts. Now, most of us had moms that just said, unless you're dead, you're going to school. But some of us, sometimes we're given that extra love and attention. Here's a little special drink for you. Here's a little special meal I made for you, a little bowl of something. Here's a little toy I just got for you so you can feel better. Stay home, propping up the pillows, and watch your favorite programs and rest, get better. I know some of you are rolling your eyes right now and say, that wasn't my household, right? But think about it. Think about those folks who've had jobs where you actually had to use your sick days or lose them. Use them or lose them. So what'd you wind up doing? Just before your sick days expired, you called up to work. I'm sorry, I'm sick. I'm going to be out for 2.5 days, using up your sick time, of course. Although today, if you called in sick and pretended like you're coughing or had a fever or something, you might be quarantined. You may not be allowed to come back, right? So you better watch that. If you're familiar with the rapper Eminem, who originally is from Detroit, you might hear him in one of his lyrics talk about Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Now, one of my favorite movies, I have a lot of favorite movies, is a movie called Baron von Munchausen. Munchausen syndrome was named after this individual in history who seemed to really exaggerate all his tales of conquests. And we've known some people like that. How big was the fish? Originally it was this big. But as they tell the story, it becomes a whale-size fish. This is an illness where not only can the symptoms be placed on the person themselves, but in Eminem's case, they were posed onto him. In other words, according to his testimonial, his mother said that he had all these weird symptoms and of course took him out of school, took him to the doctor's office, and some people will go to great lengths to fabricate their own illnesses, complaining of certain symptoms that are textbook kind of explanations. How do they have this information? Today it's pretty easy. Back in the day, you'd have to get a medical book or journal and look up the symptoms. Today, you just go online. And of course, doctors are basing their diagnosis on what you say. And so that means a variety of tests. In some extreme cases of Munchausen syndrome, people getting surgery done on them when nothing is necessary. So, let me get to my other case study. And that case study deals with the dissociative disorders. Now, as soon as you heard the term dissociative disorders, I think of disassociating from oneself. Like some of you are right now. You're floating in the air, you're not really paying attention to this. And I can understand why, because I'm not really live. I'm in your screen, but I'm not really there, sort of. But we're talking about different phenomena. For example, we're talking about things like amnesia. And of course, you know from the cartoons, how do you get amnesia? You get bopped in the head. How do you get your memory back? You get bopped again. which makes no sense if you know anything about brain damage, right? Typically what happens with amnesia, like dissociative amnesia, is you lose some of your memory, not everything. So you know how to speak, you know how to write, you may know your numbers, but you may lose some crucial information, like who you are. That's important. Now, what can cause something like that? Well, guess what? Blows to the heads can cause amnesia. But so can other things. Substances, uh, shocks to the system, like psychological trauma, can cause amnesia. We have different types. Some are selective, some are localized, some are systematized. Forgetting information is a normal phenomenon, especially when you're a student or you're an elderly person or just a little overwhelmed with information. But this is very specific, typically information that you should be able to retrieve from your memory banks, but it's not there. What typically happens in amnesia cases as the individual has worked, and over time, as the healing process begins and as they process other information, including maybe some psychological issues, some of the memory returns. Sometimes all of the memory returns, and sometimes some of it does not return. So the cases vary from person to person. This leads us to this issue of repressed memory. If you recall your chapter in memory back from Intro to Psychology, you'll know that memory sometimes is very tricky. The things that we think we might remember sometimes are blocked due to trauma, and then sometimes comes out later. Somebody mentions things, there's repeating of certain actions, and the memories start to flood back. Now, how accurate are those memories is up for debate. If you research Elizabeth Loftus, you'll get a lot of information on false memory syndrome. Now, to my case study. The name of my case study is Judy. Now, Judy, I'm just double checking to make sure that that's the right case study. It didn't sound right, so it's not quite Judy, it's actually Joey. Joey is somebody that I met some years ago when I was teaching at a different college back in Michigan. The location is Lansing, Michigan, and the name of the college is Lansing Community College, LCC. While teaching at Lansing Community College, I was teaching a very similar case load or class load that I'm teaching now, including things like Intro to Psychology, Child Psychology, and Abnormal Psychology. Well, I personally, in almost 20 years of doing therapy back in Michigan, had never seen a case of dissociative identity disorder. Now, the old name is multiple personality disorder, so most of the public is more familiar with that name. But on one particular occasion, something gave me the impression that I might be experiencing a case of DID. So let me tell you about that. My office was right down the Psych lab in that particular campus, and one time I came back to my office and opened the door, and there was a small piece of paper rolled up. And on that piece of paper, there was a small little note. And when I read the note, it says, "I'm watching you." Okay, well, my spidey senses went off a little bit, and I started looking around to see if anybody was down the hallway. But I didn't see anybody in particular watching me, and I had no idea when the note was left. It wasn't addressed to anybody, it wasn't signed. I looked at the handwriting, and it's kind of hard to detect. I'm not a handwriting analyst, but I just stuffed it in my drawer and didn't think too much of it. A couple days later, I came back to my office, and again, a little note was underneath my door, and this time I unraveled it, and it said, "I like you." Oh, okay, secret admirer. That complicates things a little bit. I didn't see anybody watching me read the note and looking for my response. Again, it wasn't signed to anybody. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular. So I stuffed that one in my drawer too. By this time, I'm getting a little suspicious, and I asked my associates, can you keep an eye on my office? Because somebody's leaving me notes and I have no idea who it is, and I don't know if it's a joke or what the issue is. So they said they would. A couple of days pass, I'm going to my office, and they call me from the psych lab, and they said, hey, we saw somebody stick something underneath their door. They described the person in detail, their jacket, their height, the weight, what they look like in general. I knew exactly who it was. So I go to my office, I open the door, and this time there's another note wrapped, but there's nothing written on the note, but there is a tool inside of it. It's an X-Acto knife. I'm not sure if you're familiar with an X-Acto knife, but it kind of looks like a regular knife, except for there's just a sharp edge at the very bottom of the tool. And it's used for arts and craft projects, things of that nature. Let me see if I can find something that looks like it. This is a standard pocket knife, but the X-Acto knife has a long handle and has a sharp end to it, so you can cut into cardboard or other instruments, depending, or other tools that you might need, or substances that you might need a sharp tool to craft something. Okay, so why is this sharp instrument, this X-Acto knife, jammed underneath my door? Now my spidey senses are really getting a little worried. So I happen to know who this student was. It happened to be a female student. She was a former student in my abnormal psych class, and to the best of my knowledge was still taking classes there in that building. I would see her on a regular basis, so I thought the next time I see her, I'm going to say hello and try to get an explanation. So I saw her and I said, hey, so how's it going? And I immediately noticed that she didn't seem to be on edge or nervous. And she said, fine. And I said, do you have a couple minutes I can talk to you about something? And she said, sure. I said, well, my office is right here. And again, she didn't seem apprehensive, like, oh, busted, you found my notes, you found the X-Acto knife tool I gave you. So she sat in my office, and I opened the drawer up, and I presented her with the notes, a couple notes that I had received, as well as the X-Acto knife. And again, not a look of, oh, okay, you got me, nothing like that. It was just, oh. And she looks at the notes, and she says, this looks like Joey's work, his handwriting. I said, well, who's Joey? And she says, I'm pretty sure he's one of my alters. I said, what do you mean? She says, well, I was recently diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, and Joey's the trickster. He's the prankster. He likes to play jokes on people. And he probably left you these notes just to freak you out a little bit, and probably left you the X-Acto knife. So what's interesting about her particular case was she was not the typical DID individual. To the best of her knowledge, and with the help of her mother, she said that in therapy she found no evidence of any abuse that she experienced, psychological, sexual, physical abuse. And that's a typical characteristics that we see in a lot of DID individuals that have been traumatized pretty early on. And the theory is their sense of personality, their wholeness, has been fragmented into different beings by necessity, because as you're experiencing all this trauma, you can't experience it as a whole person. You have to fragment and disassociate yourself from that person. So that's why it's called dissociative identity disorder. We have two or more distinct personalities. Now you could argue and say, well, we all have two or more distinct personalities. But my argument is, no, these are very distinct personalities. Well, not only do you go by different names, but your blood pressure might be different. Your heart rate might be different. Your preferences for music and food are distinctly different. And guess what? One person doesn't even know necessarily what the other person is doing. And she had no memory of delivering those notes when she clearly was seen delivering that X-Acto knife. And she denied it, and I believe her. So out of nearly 20 years of therapy, I never saw, to the best of my knowledge, anybody in therapy with DID, but at least one of my former students claimed to have it, and I believed her. So we'll continue with completing Chapter 6 and to give you the answers from Chapter 5 and 6 next time. Thank you for your attention.